Good afternoon and a very warm welcome in every sense of the word to Stakeholder Workshop 7. I'm Eric Sampson from various places. Today I'm from Ertico and I've got the very enjoyable job of moderating this workshop. And can I just put the emphasis on work? It's not going to be all from the people you see on the panel. Let me give you a little bit of context. In 2011 or late 2010, I went to a very interesting meeting called by Peter Hendy, the Commissioner of Transport for London. And this was about the Olympics. He said, we're going to tell you today, there was a room full of 100 of us, and he said, I'm going to tell you today about the Olympics and the Transport for London planning. We think we've thought of everything. We've been working on this for ages. We've got a really good plan. The only problem is there's something wrong with it. We don't know what's wrong with it, and that's why you're here. There are things that we've forgotten. There are things that we've got wrong. If we knew what they were, we'd change them, but we don't. And that's why we've called this meeting. We want you to comment on what you see. And it struck me that there's very strong similarity with today. We're going to hear from the upcoming Dutch presidency about a plan, a concept, a challenge, a very exciting scenario. And there is something not quite right with it. There are bits that are going to be difficult, bits that might not be necessary. They may have forgotten something. That's the purpose of the workshop, to shine light on it and just see where it can be made better, more productive, more effective. We will run this in 3 parts. Marjolein Sonnema from the Ministry will talk about the planning. The vacant chairs will then be filled by panelists, and I'll welcome them when the moment comes. And then part 3, I'm going to open it to the floor and invite comments from anybody on any aspect, things that they've heard or things that they have not heard. So let's kick off. Marjolein, let's hear from you.
Thank you very much. A warm welcome to all of you. It's good to see that slowly the room is getting fuller and fuller. I hope it's not getting too hot. So, is there anybody in the room who doesn't have a smartphone? Well, of course, we all have. And the smartphone changed our lives rapidly, very rapidly. I have 3 teenage children, and I often communicate with them through WhatsApp. And I can tell you that's a blessing. And why? Because if 10 years ago, I should have called them. And that's not something teenage children like their parents to do. So WhatsApp is for me a very light way to stay in touch with my teenage children. Another example, my parents of 85 can communicate with their doctor via Skype. And this saves them a lot of trouble going to their doctor. So, 10 years ago, I was a director for telecoms in the Ministry of Economic Affairs in the Netherlands. And I remember we had a meeting with the telecom providers and some people from the government. And one of the providers told us, in due course, we are all going to watch movies and films and other things on our mobile phone. And I thought, why? I can watch it on television. And also many of the other providers in the room said, no, this is not going to happen. We couldn't believe it was going to happen. Well, it did. And we all know now what we do with our mobile phone. So now I have seen personally all these developments taking place. I believe that there will be self-driving cars in future. Things are changing rapidly. And there's a lot of uncertainty. What I'm about to speak to you about is about this uncertainty, how to deal with this uncertainty, and also maybe a bit on how can we diminish this uncertainty. As I said, we're at the edge of a new era. The next 20 years, transport will change a lot more than it did over the last 100 years. A big shift is going on. The heart of the car has always been, for the last 100 years, the engine. And in future, and now already, software will be the new heart. And different from the engine that you have to bring to the garage every now and then. Welcome. Different to the engine, which you have to bring to the garage, the software can get an update if you want every hour, and it can add new functionalities to your car. So instead of buying a new car, you can just update your existing car. And this is already happening. It is already possible to have a car and be in it, get a software update which changes it from a two-wheel drive to a four-wheel drive car. To illustrate how quick the developments can go, I think you're familiar with all these companies, though they are very new. And I think maybe you're all maybe using Twitter, Facebook, maybe even you're using it now. And take Airbnb. It's a company, as you can see on the slide, it was founded only in 2008. And last summer, they had 17 million bookings, only Airbnb last summer, of which this made them the biggest hotel chain of the world, 2008 till 2015. And actually, I stay in an Airbnb, and I already heard more people attending these meetings staying in an Airbnb. So it changed, and it changed quickly. So just to bring it back to mobility, the developments in automated and connecting driving will have a huge impact on the challenges we are facing today. It can help us to improve safety. The figures I'll mention now have been mentioned very often. 90% of the traffic accidents are caused by human error. And in Europe, we have 30,000 fatal injuries every year. So phase out the human factor, and you have a huge improvement. Smart mobility can also help us keep moving. If only 10% of the vehicles use adaptive cruise control, we have 30% less of traffic jams. And of course, it can also help us to save fuel, and it will reduce cost. For example, grouping trucks into platoons gives 5 to 15% less fuel use. These are quite big figures. But it can also have a huge impact on us as citizens of Europe, on us as drivers. Imagine that all the businessmen in London, Madrid, here in Bordeaux, could spend their commute time working. This would give them maybe 1 hour, 2 hours extra per day. What would you do with this amount of time? This could have an enormous impact on the productivity and the comfort. Imagine there are no more empty buses driving through rural areas. But we have a completely new, innovative, and flexible mobility service, mobility on demand. Of course, I can't predict the future, but imagine what it would mean to a blind person or a handicapped person. They can travel alone instead of always having other people with them to help them. So, from impact on society, I go back to impact on economy. At this moment, EU has an enormous automotive, ICT, and telecom industry, and that is of great importance for the competitiveness and economic growth of Europe. And this is not just a German story, or a French story, or a Spanish story. This is a European story, as you can see on this slide. We can all benefit from this development. So, there you have my observations on the benefits connected and automated driving can bring to society and economy. But how do we get there? Which challenges need to be met? To a certain level, we are all facing the same challenges. We are looking for answers on the same questions. For example, how are we going to make sure that we come to an effective system in which cars can communicate with each other and also with the infrastructure? So it's not only about autonomous, in our view. It's not only about connected. In the end, it is about a car like this one who is communicating with its environment. Who is the owner of all the data this car in the picture produces? Who can use the data? And who will have access to it? And how are we going to deal with privacy? How do we prevent that commercial parties know and benefit from your data on where you are, your whereabouts? And do you think it's a good idea that McDonald's knows and has a possibility to lure you into his restaurants? Is that what we want? Another question: how do we manage the expectations and answer questions of our citizens? How do we deal with worries about liability, privacy, and cybercrime? And I just got an email from my department, and it was stating that there had been questions in the Netherlands about facilities who are already there in trucks, certain buttons you can push and it will automatically start braking. And there were questions from citizens: is this safe? So this, how this is going to land in our society is also a very important and big question we need to answer. Well, questions which need to be answered, many questions. And I think also at that moment, many countries, and also the industry, and also the European Commission, they're trying to find answers. And great things are already happening, as you can see a few of the examples involving ministers in this slide. Think of the Drive Me project in Sweden, which has also been mentioned yesterday by the minister in the ministerial session. This will be the world's largest, the first large-scale autonomous driving pilot project with 100 Volvos using public roads in Gothenburg area in 2070. I would love to see that. Think of the fact that the UK already announced a £29 million in funding of 3 driverless car trials, a shuttle in Greenwich, a pod in Milton Keynes, and a Wildcat developed in Bristol. But also think of the strategy for automated and connected driving that Germany presented and even discussed with the Transport G7 ministers. And also think of the initiatives within the European Commission, like the CITS platform of DG Move, where great progress is made on cooperative ITS deployment issues, and also DG Grow with their Gear 2030. All these initiatives, and I think many of you are involved in it, so I can say your initiatives are great and needed. They are needed to find answers, the answers we're looking for. And I take it that you're struggling with the same questions I'm struggling with. But the problem is that each of us is pursuing the answers on its own. And only a few of these initiatives are linked or integrated. And with linking of integrating, I'm not talking only about cross-border linking. I'm also talking about linking the worlds of connected and automated driving, as is shown in this graph. And I'm also talking about linking member states, the EU, and industry together. When I was a little girl, I lived near the German border, and I had to walk to school, to primary school, every day. And I had to pass a train crossing. And very often, I had to wait there. And then not just for a few minutes, but 20, 30 minutes. Why was that? This was because the trains had to rearrange from a German to a Dutch system. Imagine the cost involved in standardizing all these different safety systems and different voltages in Europe. So I think that is something we would not like to happen with the self-driving cars. Because in that case, you come to the next slide. This would look like this. And is this what you would like to happen, what you want to be the case? Updates at every border you pass in Europe. So the question is, what can I do? What can you do? What can we do together to prevent this situation to happen? And just imagine we can just easily cross every border without any hinder. Imagine the huge profit this can bring to our economy and to our citizens. We will need to answer a lot of questions, and I already mentioned a few of them. I mentioned ownership, data ownership, privacy, compatibility of systems, and I would like to mention a few more. We have to harmonize regulation. We have to make sure that large-scale across-border testing is made possible. We have to work together in research and to make more progress than we do at the moment. And we really have to coordinate and attune investments to each other and to the developments. So in the framework of our upcoming presidency of the EU, we have started a dialogue with many of you also here today. People from member states, people from the Commission, people from industry. We started a dialogue, and we see this as a first step towards a broad and fruitful cooperation across Europe. And we propose, as the Netherlands, to sign a declaration at the informal council, which will be held in Amsterdam on the 14th of April. And we hope the signing of this declaration will give a boost to this theme, to automated and connected driving. And mind you, this is the first time the subject will be discussed on a political level in the European Union. So to sum up, what I think we need is a common and not a scattered approach. I would like you to think about what can I share and what more can I do? What information, what knowledge can I actively share with other member states, with industry, with the Commission? On which projects could we work together? For instance, on corridors, could we define cross-border corridors for testing? Or could we have a group dealing with the legal issues? Well, I hope this conversation today will not be only a conversation here in Bordeaux and now in Bordeaux, but let it be in the top of our minds for the near future. Thank you very much.
So, there's the challenge. Can I invite the panelists to come up and organise themselves through? And I'm afraid my good colleague Xavier Delache, who is standing in at very short notice for Christine Boucher, is the man without the nameplate. So, we have Eric Jonart from ASEA, the European Association of Automotive Manufacturers, Magda Kopczynska, who's the Transport Director in DG Move, Kees de Vries, who's Chairman of the Ertico Supervisory Board, Phil Blythe, who's the Chief Scientific Advisor to the Transport Ministry in the UK, and Xavier Delache from the French Ministry. Let me kick off with a question perhaps for Marjolein. You've covered a number of challenging issues. The arguments for cross-border harmonisation for connected vehicles feel relatively straightforward, rather like harmonisation of wireless. You know, it would be ludicrous to retune your radio. But the case for cross-border operation of highly automated vehicles looks very difficult. You've got 28 member states with different regulatory regimes, different legal frameworks, different traffic offences. Is progress going to be just slow or impossible?
Okay. Yeah, regulation. Well, to start with, it's a fact. It's for sure that legislation will always be too slow because legislation is a process which takes a lot of time. So you have to take that in mind. On the other hand, I think we can work on a bit of deregulation, and we can try to go to a system of regulation, which we do more and more, a system where you don't put everything in a law, but you can also put things in below the law. I don't know the English word for it, and it might be different in all member states, but there are more flexible ways of programming your legislation. And I think especially in a field like this, where the movements, the developments are going very fast, you need to make sure that you make if you change legislation, you change it in a way that it can easily be adapted again. So flexible. We also have to work on deregulation, but yes, legislation is usually the slowest.
The other thought is that you've got the presidency, you've got 6 months in which to, I was going to say make an impact, perhaps that's asking for too much. You've got 6 months in which to start things moving, to be the little snowball that creates the avalanche. What would be your priority?
What would be the priority? Well, maybe not for the people here, but the first priority is get it on the agenda, on the political agenda. Well, this is going to happen, but this is something, well, it's the first time, as I said. And here we are, all people very much involved in the field of automated and connected driving, but there are also very many member states who are not involved. And what we want is also to get these countries with us so they can start working together, and not only the few countries, maybe half of the EU, who are working already on the theme. So this is more on the process side, but it's very important. It doesn't seem to be so important, but it is very important. And I think what is important from the content side, it is important to have harmonized and consistent legislation. We definitely need to work on that. I think we definitely need to look at the issue of data. We have the ownership of the data and the question of the security of data, which really has to be met. And I think we should not only be discussing about these kind of subjects, I think we also should start in doing trials together. So we have to start building a network of corridors, cross-border corridors on which we could learn together. So I could go on forever, but at least these are 3 main topics.
Yeah. When you were saying about data, that prompted me. I was going to ask Eric Jonop, but I'm going to Q-jump, as it were, to Magda. Data ownership has been one of the issues coming from the Commission's cooperative ITS platform. Is the continuation of the platform, which many of us very much hope for, is this going to be of support to the Dutch presidency?
Yes.
You see, never say that Commission and Member States don't work closely. They even answer questions for us. Before I answer your question, I just had this thought actually, I took some time and walked around the exhibition place, and I was just thinking, I've been following ITS for a relatively short time compared to most of you. But if you think back to ITS Congress 5 or 10 years ago, and it's like the example you gave, Marjolein, about the movies watched on mobile phones. If somebody told you 10 years ago that you would come to an ITS Congress and it would be all about connected driving and autonomous vehicles, you would think it's Star Wars Part 10, basically, that they are talking about. And look what happened. And what Marjolein said, and what everybody's saying at any meeting we are at the Congress, we are at the moment of a big transformational change for transport. And obviously, it is difficult for policymakers, for regulators to catch up, because we can't put a brake, we can't stop the reality, and we can't say, reality, wait, we'll come up with the ideal framework, and then you step in, and then you function smoothly and without problems and cross-border. We don't have that comfort. At the same time, when we started the CITS platform, for which the call for applications was published in June last year, basically at that moment we said, it's cooperative ITS platform, because in June 2014, automation was still considered research and a thing of the future. We are talking 18 months ago. This is what we are faced with. So obviously, we do want. The platform is not just for the sake of being a meeting excuse for many of you. The idea was to put in one room experts and people who can actually work at and excuse me for the word technical, but at the working level, coming from various parts of industry, not just the automotive industry, but also telecoms, also insurance, but also member states, to start looking into what needs to be done for an interoperable deployment of cooperative ITS. 6 months later, we already knew that some of the topics that we put as the potential points for discussion, be it security, be it safety, ownership of data, international dimension, the overall question of connectivity and the telecom and spectrums, these are these are things that are as relevant for cooperative ITS as they are for automated driving. So what we will be planning with CITS platform is to have the final report in January. I'm looking at the team who need to work on that, and I hope they will not run away from the room now. But this is a stakeholder document. This is an input for the Commission, but it is also as much input for the Dutch presidency. Because I think what we are also seeing, in spite of all those terribly difficult and complicated questions, we are seeing a momentum here. It is not that Marjolein is talking to us today at this meeting. We've been discussing the Dutch presidency plan to look into that topic for several months now. And I think this political level support by ministers is absolutely crucial, but this is not everything. And this will not be the start of the process. This will not be the end of the process. It is one of the important elements to make sure that we are able to identify what needs to be done, who needs to do it, what is the framework, the timing, what is the financing framework? What is the legislative framework? Do we need to legislate? Can we do it in a different manner? And so, I mean, I can't speak actually for the CITS platform, because CITS platform has to agree to continue, but I hope they will agree to continue.
Okay. I think the phrase you were looking for was the end of the beginning. Pinch it from Churchill.
Well, I'm not really sure, because, you know, I think with everything that we are seeing, I mean, even the things which are presented at this ITS Congress, probably in 5 years' time, we'll discover that, you know, wow, yes, we were naive and we thought this was the solution, but the solution will be completely different. That's the whole thing about transformational change. You don't know the solution. And that's the beauty of it, obviously, but also the challenge.
Yeah. Let's ask Eric of the view of the automotive industry.
I thought it's optimistic.
We're always optimistic. No, well, what is the question? The question, the initiative of the Dutch presidency?
Yes, how's it in? Yes.
No, we welcome it. I mean, really this is an outstanding initiative. I mean, it doesn't happen very often that we see, you know, an upcoming presidency being so proactive in identifying, you know, a team which is relevant for society, as well as for the economy, for business. And I think what the focus on connectivity and automation is, I think, the right focus. We know already that this is going to transform the industry completely, will turn the industry into a provider of mobility solutions, and I think connectivity and automation will help, you know, getting us there, and at the same time will allow the automotive industry as well to provide better solutions to some of today's challenges, which will also be tomorrow's challenges, like, you know, how do we address the future of urban mobility? How do we reduce, how do we drive efficiency in the transport system? How do we encourage further fuel economies while reducing emissions? Connectivity as well as automation will help us to make further progress on this. So I think it is a welcome initiative. What especially I think is important in what the Dutch government tries to achieve is that they recognize that there are a lot of initiatives which have been taken, and the Commission has undertaken quite important initiatives, not only DG Move, DG Connect, research, growth, Lots of member states have been very active and have been pioneers in this area. Industry has been doing a lot. Maybe we haven't each time, we didn't get front page, articles, because that is the way our, industry is operating. We don't talk always about all the things which are happening, but it is. I think it's important that we coordinate all these initiatives now, that we set some priorities as well, and that we do it at the European level. Because at the end of the day, we talk about technology which is globally relevant. This is at the end of the day also an opportunity for all the industry players in Europe to kind of either maintain global leadership in this area or to gain a global leadership role in this one. But we can only get there if we have a European position and provide a European response.
Thank you. Let's stay at the European level for a moment, and let me ask Kees, the C in Ertico is coordination. What's the Ertico role in this agenda?
Yeah, first of all, Eric, I want to make a big compliment to the team in the Netherlands also, and to the people in Magda's departments for preparing it and bringing it to this stage. I think the role of Ertico, and I keep referring to that. Remember, Ertico is rather unique. Our Ertico connects knowledge institutes, automobile clubs, so end users, IRU, truck operating companies, automotive industry, federal and regional governments, plus industry for the roadside infrastructure. And knowing that all these parties involved and are behind, say, a more harmonized approach is extremely important to keep things progressing. And that's where I believe that Ertico can help to ensure two important things. That's coherency. So do we make sure that the things, and I think I totally agree with you, Magda, the things that are currently coming as a heritage out of the cooperative ITS platform, that content and the learnings get capitalized in these further initiatives. I think so. Coherency is very important, and the other thing that where Ertico can help is continuity. So make sure that where I consider these initiatives from the Dutch presidency as an impulse, and in the physics says impulse is mass times velocity. Yeah. So I see it like that, So we are now building mass. So we get a strong impulse out of the Dutch presidency, but we need to make sure that we build something that goes beyond 2016. And then I hope, and I think that the board of Ertico is very committed to that it needs a lot of further discussion about what are the next steps. So who's going to do what, as Magda said, what are the milestones that we agree on together, and how do we ensure that there is leadership in place also in 2017, 2018 to continue? Because developments will go fast, I totally agree, but we also know that there's still a lot of work ahead of us before cars drive from Paris to Bordeaux large scale. I was very surprised, by the way, that there was a car the day before yesterday from PSA who drove autonomously from Bordeaux to Paris. But before that can be done massively, a lot of things need to happen.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let me turn to the two member state representatives. You've heard already the case for harmonisation for cross-border interoperability, harmonisation of legal issues, regulation. It occurs to me we might do well to harmonise terminology, because I think we still have at least 3 different descriptions of this area. Xavier, how do you react to this?
Well, thank you. Do you hear me? Yes. Just before responding to your question, I would like to go back a little about uncertainty and necessity to act rapidly and to set priorities. And this will respond to your questions about setting priorities. I think we have uncertainty about what path those technical evolutions will follow. We know they are at our door, but as was said previously, from being at our door on a few models to being implemented as a whole fleet and in traffic management and in other policy issues, we by chance have a little time. But this time mustn't be lost. So I think the first task is to analyze how different paths, different steps will call for different political action or collective action. And I think setting a 10 years path, as I was stressed by the Minister of New Zealand, and I think it's more or less how different countries see the thing. Let's say within 10 years, what are the steps, regulatory, collaborative standards that have to be addressed so that this movement shouldn't be slowed but accelerated. I think in setting this, in trying to be responsive to this evolution, we also have to build stakeholders' dialogues that are efficient. We can't discuss everything with everybody all around the world. There are special fora that should be used for. They are suitable for certain things and not suitable for other things. So our pledge, and I think we expressed this to the Netherlands presidency, future presidency already, is maybe to have quite a detailed analysis of what has to be done and what would be the proper fora to do so. Let's take the example of standardization. Standardization may do things in the operability layer, but maybe from some topics it's not adapted. We have to go faster than standardization, or we have to set precise mandate for standardization so that they should know precisely in a short time frame what they need to produce in order not to slow this path. So now going back to subsidiarity, your question might be about subsidiarity. What should be done at the European level and national level? I think the list of topics that we almost all have in mind that are well quoted in the Dutch paper. So there are things about driving rules and all about the Vienna Convention. There are liability and insurance issues. There are driving, learning and driving license regulation. Cybersecurity was quoted. Data exchanges regulation and data openness, privacy. And afterwards, there are more, I would say, downwards issues like traffic management, rules and practices, infrastructure, policy, design, road sign quality, design and maintenance. Frequencies allocation was quoted too. Maybe some needs for data transmission capacities. We hear this in national policy concerns. And the whole subject of vehicle homologation, certification, and including for its safety related systems or algorithms. So I think taking this list and going maybe in a more detailed analysis of what is under this list of themes could help us also to see what is really at the European level for regulation or for cooperation or for experiments. And I urge maybe before the end of the presidency that we have a clear roadmap of what is relevant for the EU level, what is relevant for regulation, and what is relevant for other fora that are not regulation, but that might be exchanges of experiences or standard, or something that has to be invented maybe, which is in between standardization and regulation, let's call it specification, which is more or less what the cooperative ETS platform produces, but which should be maybe re-engineered so that it could be really useful for the markets.
Can I just say, because I actually didn't say that in addition to the report, which will be a stakeholder report, the Commission is planning to come up with a roadmap for deployment of cooperative ITS. As I said, for that we are relatively sure that we will have the input from the group. If we need to add small elements concerning automated autonomous vehicles, then so be it. And this is something we want to have on the table by the end of the Dutch presidency, exactly. So, voila.
Phil, is all the research done? I mean, apart from giving the UK view, do we need to do any more?
We're really at a cusp, I think, with technology at the moment. We're at a point where a lot of the technologies we need are there. They're not being used, in many cases, in the right way as of such. And the challenge is to really bring that together to deliver the cooperative and autonomous systems of the future. And I think there's a lot of ways this can go, but I think the one thing I would be concerned about, and this is why I thought the slide before last showing 8 autonomous systems on the top of a car so it can travel around Europe is really, really important. I remember 20 years ago, outputs from the original Drive and Drive 2 programs on things like electronic tolling. Because so many systems existed and the regulation, the standardization took so long, it took 20 years to bring those systems together to be fit for purpose for Europe. We can't afford that. The OEMs want to go forward and they're very dynamic in this and they can see benefits to their customers, benefits for safety. The infrastructure owners and governments want to go forward because, again, there's a whole raft of other benefits for them and Europe as a whole. Clearly, we can become the world leader in this if we can ensure that the challenges are met. So I think as an initiative to bring this together, I think it's really, really important for Europe. Obviously, in the UK, we're undertaking trials, bringing in all the different stakeholders, including the insurance companies, the automobile associations, and don't forget the end users. Time and again, I think, with ITS, it's been a technology push from the companies rather than a market pull. What do the end users want? What does the market really need? And I think it's really, really important we get this right. And I think the other challenge is to find that regulation, standardization, and the freedom to develop creative products, because the automotive industry want the unique selling points of what they are delivering is more interesting to certain parts of the population than what others are doing. But at the same time, we need that underlying harmonization. What does it mean for things like HMI and the experience of driving the car as opposed to offering everything in a different way? So there's lots of challenges, and I think to try and cover that at the European level so we make sure that we're delivering systems that are fit for purpose, safe across Europe is really, really important. If there was one more comment across this whole cooperative and autonomous space, which I think is fantastic, and it will deliver a real step change to road transportation and to other modes as well. I still don't think we're elaborating all the benefits and all the sectors that will benefit from it well enough, and to get the buy-in of the politicians, the end users, the stakeholders, those that will have to invest in the equipment, in the vehicles and at the roadside. I think it's really, really important that we ensure that all those benefits are well elaborated. And they will be different in different countries to some extent, but lots of commonality as well.
Well, I'm glad you raised that one, because someone was complaining to me the other day saying it's extremely easy to make a business case for hard physical infrastructure because the cost benefits have been around and are well understood. Understanding the cost benefits of ITS is an immature art, and there's been a lot of hard work in one of Magda's working groups to try to get this cost benefit. Xavier, did you want to?
I would like to stress your point. If we have at a certain level of EU policy to, well, make arbitrage between classical infrastructure investments and those investments, I think we have to have the same level of cost-benefit analysis tools. And we know we had to do so in the European framework a few decades ago, maybe just 1 or 2 decades ago, on external costs with a handbook on external costs. If we had a handbook on ITS benefits, it would be useful. Thank you.
Yes, please. Yes.
One request I have, at least, I'm not in charge of the final editorial of the proposal, but if there is so much agreement on this proposal coming from the Dutch team, we might want to look into how these initiatives around autonomous driving, connected driving, is put in connection to electrification. Since electrical cars pickup is still a big problem in Europe. It's starting to become better, but also from a policy perspective, there are many different solutions that each and every country undertakes, either are not connected to tax regime or a temporary subsidiary. And I think it would be a missed chance that we would have in 3, 4, 5 years a fantastic, harmonized system for connected or automated driving, and we have forgotten, how that is brought in connection to a pan-European infrastructure to charge cars, either via charging stations or on specific infrastructure, while driving.
Okay. Building upon the last interventions, I think in the area of connectivity and automation, we have been overloaded, I think, in Europe with a wide variety of pilot projects. And I think the time is there, in my opinion, now to take stock of what we learned from these pilot projects, to inventorize, learnings and insights coming out of it. And these will lead to insights on which we can further build. I want to use this as an opportunity to promote here also Ertico, who has done a lot of these pilot projects involving a wide variety of stakeholders across Europe. And it's we sometimes have the tendency to go from one to the other. So why not just kind of going for, the pause button, push the pause button, look at what we learned, and then turn that into action. So that's kind of, and that could be something which could be started, for instance, as part of this Dutch presidency initiative, even if I know that a lot of that is already also happening through the Commission, but kind of bringing it all together, also what is happening at national level through the member states would in that respect be very useful. That's one. Second, Kees was mentioning infrastructure. In the context of electrification, but again, what would be helpful, I think, in the context of this Dutch presidency initiative, that is that we start a reflection about, if we want to deploy across Europe connectivity and automation big time, what's going to be the infrastructure needs? And what do we need to harmonize across Europe, especially then in terms of standardization, in order to allow for a faster take-up by the market of this new technology. The fact that this is going to be an initiative by the Dutch government, so including all the other member states, would make this a very good topic and a good priority, because at the end of the day, when you talk about road infrastructure, the responsibility is primarily with member states. So those would be kind of two areas which I think would immediately be valuable and would help us driving the agenda forward.
Thank you. Now, for next 20, 25 minutes or so, I'd like to direct attention the other way and open the floor for the audience. I think I've seen at least 4 member states who may want to contribute. I've seen Finland, I've seen Germany, I've seen Sweden. That's only 3. It proves I can't count. Oh, we've got Sweden down twice. You've got policy representatives and industry, but Spain. Oh, Spain. Right. We have roving microphones. When you first speak, if you just tell us briefly who you are, and then the floor is yours. Try to keep it under 20 minutes. Yes?
Hello, since you mentioned Finland first, I first took the floor. Kirsi Miettinen, I'm from the Finnish Ministry of Transport and Communications. And yes, indeed, we very much welcome the Dutch initiative, so that putting this issue on the table of the policymakers, that is very valuable indeed. When listening to the conversation so far, I would like to stress the approach of the overall paper, or the paper overall, learning by doing principle, which I think I cannot stress too much. Right. So when we say legislation, and when we say harmonization, and especially when we say harmonized legislation, I already start having some bells ringing in my head, and saying that, first of all, harmonization, of course we need, for example, workable mechanisms for cross-border things, but in the end, and especially at this point as we don't know about the future really. And the member states do vary. We have rural areas, we have cities, we have very densely populated areas, we have very almost empty rural areas. And there might not be one-size-fits-all solutions. We must allow all kinds of flowers to flourish at this moment. And then again, well, legislation, I would rather talk about kind of rules for the play or something like that, Mrs. Sonnema was talking about lower level regulation. Maybe that was the idea. But anyways, what we need is not new legislation as such at this point. I think deregulation probably more, and also cooperation between the member states and all the stakeholders, Commission of course, so that we can influence the international framework so that it would also allow things to happen. But the learning by doing approach, why is it so important? And now I think that when listening to the conversation that it is so important, because when you say, for example, liability, and put a group of lawyers sitting together and say that now you have to solve the issue of liability. It's like an elephant that nobody can really swallow. But when you have a concrete trial or experiment, you have a number of features there that reflect all those difficult issues that were shown on Mrs. Sonnema's slides, and you can start finding solutions for those problems that are much smaller than the elephant in itself. And maybe next case you can use those and find another solutions so that the elephant could be swollen bit by bit. Well, in short, let's do the experiments.
Oh. Yeah. Thank you, Finland. So it sounds like the Eurovision Song Contest, doesn't it? Right, who would like to go next? Yeah, Spain. This, Sweden.
Talking about Eurovision context, we were the winner. So, as usual, my name is Åsa Wagner, and I'm from the Swedish Ministry of Enterprise and Innovation, which is also the Ministry for Transport and Infrastructure. And we, of course, support the initiative from the Netherlands, and we really welcome all cooperation that we have on the self-driving and autonomous and automated driving and vehicles and all those different names on the same thing. We also really like and support the CITS platform, which we think is very valuable, the work that is done. And we're really looking forward to the stakeholder report and also the communication and the roadmap. And we're looking forward the way forward within the Commission and also the work that we do in all the member states. And of course, you are all welcome to Gothenburg in Sweden and experience the Drive Me project. You can also be involved. This is a very open project, so you can all be involved. Be it as a researcher or a member state participant or whatever industry. We're really looking forward all kinds of cooperation. And because this is a very well-educated audience, I would suggest that you come 2017 when we have those 100 cars actually running in the streets. Thank you.
Thank you, Sweden. Okay. It is Spain now.
Hello, everybody. It's Ana Blanco from the Traffic Administration in Spain. As you may know, we belong to the Ministry of Interior, which is quite strange in this environment, not even in the industry ministry, but not only in the transport ministry. It's quite weird. But we have the competencies in traffic management. Well, I may say that Spain is following the current initiatives related autonomous driving and connected vehicles driving. We do support the initiatives of the future Dutch presidency. And as we have followed in the previous months, different initiatives around, for instance, the testing procedures and testing that other countries like UK or the Dutch government has presented for testing, and will probably come in the next months with a procedure also. But it's something an example how regulation we should have the same or an harmonization in those legal issues. I do support what the representative from France has mentioned. In the future, it's important to be effective, and we also ask, this huge list of different issues around autonomous driving and connected vehicles should come on the floor. It's important to distinguish or try to see where member states should participate, and also at what at European level has to be approached. And finally, we do support the work under the cooperative ITS platform. I think we are really expecting the outcomes from the platform, and we will see which part of these outcomes is also, related, has an input in autonomous driving. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I can't see the far side of the room very well because of the lights, but any member state over there want to comment?
Thank you. My name is Christoph Gehler from the German Federal Ministry of Transport and Digital Infrastructure. Well, just to say it, I'm not authorized to give an official statement of the German government, but as I just presented our national strategy on automated and connected driving, and you were so kind to present our minister on your slides. Just a few words. Generally, we had several bilateral meetings and already discussed the Dutch strategy in the non-paper several times, and we gave you our comments. And in general, what I can really say, that your ideas are fully compatible with the German ideas. In particular, what we welcome is your idea on combining automated and connected driving. You showed it on one slide with the two lines of technology coming together, and this is also the German intention for the future, to bring really automated and connected driving together. We welcome this really. As I said, we generally you commented, described all the topics which are also of relevance in the German strategy. I think I do not have to complete it. We are proud that our strategy has been approved by the cabinet and is now officially available. What was new for me, and what I will take back to Berlin, maybe we can use the time here and later discussions wherever, was your idea and your considerations on cross-border testing. We've just have our national, I presented just 1 hour ago, project with testbed with the motorway A9 between Munich and Nuremberg. But I think this idea of the corridors should be deepened, and we should keep to it. We have the corridor project from Amsterdam, Frankfurt, Vienna. This is one project, but it should not remain the last project of this kind, and I will take this idea as an input for our discussions back with me to Berlin. Thank you.
Well, it's great to hear that initiative we took from the Netherlands, from the idea, the feeling that this is an important subject which needed to be taken up, is so much getting so much support. It's very nice to hear. But I think I want to stretch it a little bit, because we have reached stage 1, I think, in our declaration. And stage 1 is we all agree it's important, and we have many questions, and we agree about the questions, and we agree about that they need to be answered, and we agree maybe even on well, a corridor approach could be one of the things we could be doing. But wouldn't it be great if we could stretch it a bit further, and we could make a declaration of Amsterdam in which we also gave some ideas on how to proceed, so on the governance. So by asking all these questions and agreeing on these are the right questions, how are we going to make sure, how are we going to organize, how are we going to deal with the governance of making sure that we're heading for answering the questions? So I would like to ask everybody here in the panel, but also hopefully in the room, if I would ask you, what would be your one thing in relation to the organization?
Can we delay that question? Because
Sorry?
can we delay that question for the last 10 minutes? Yeah. Yeah. Because I'd like to hear from anyone else on the floor who's got anything to say. Then your points to the panel.
Yeah.
So
I'll watch my watch.
Having silenced the panel, I'm now open for business. Anyone in the room? There may be representatives from America. I think that's an ex-member state of the UK, so you qualify. So, invite comments from anyone or questions.
Hi, I'm Jane Lappin, and I'm speaking from a colony across the sea, but not officially on behalf of the U.S. Department of Transportation. We have been working with the European Commission, with the Japanese Ministry of Transport now. I think we're 6 years along in our exchange. It has been an extraordinarily productive exchange. It's opened up the world for us through you, and perhaps also in exchange. And we endorse and hope that we can be engaged with any further kinds of organized exchange around understanding the impact of increasingly automated vehicles across Europe, the US, and the rest of the globe.
Thank you. Other comments, criticisms, questions?
Thank you very much. Menno van der Kamp, European Commission, DG Move. So it's some kind of in-crowd here. You got my attention when we spoke about the corridors, because I'm the advisor in DG Move and in the Unit B1, 10T networks, the advisor to Mr. Pat Cox, who is European coordinator for the Scandinavian Mediterranean Core Network Corridor. So we already have in place some kind of framework which defines the corridors, which defines the 9 geographical corridors in Europe. Mr. Pat Cox just went on his mission to Kiev. He's also involved in that, but he sent his best regards. And his only message once was that I should spread the word that we should make use of those corridors. Not only the corridors of making infrastructure and infrastructure investments, but also making it and stretching it to its potential. We want to make it as a multimodal corridor for every mode, but also for ITS, for example. And what his thoughts was that we could, for example, think about the Scandinavian Mediterranean Core Network corridors. It's also running through the sensitive Alpine environment. And there you got 3 member states, Germany, Austria, and Italy. That sensitive Alpine environment could also be used as a test bedding, a test field of those automatic vehicles. And then you already have 3 member states. You can already build upon the existing framework of these corridors. So I think we should really see it in a more integrated perspective that we could use and build upon existing structures. And I really was also struck by your remark that we could maybe take stock of what already is there, and we could build upon the technologies that are already in place. So yeah, it's almost like let's do it together, but we should really see what the synergies could be, and I think that's bringing us forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Jane at the back? Yes.
So now a very different kind of question to the panel and to you, Eric. Much of the activity that we see around automated vehicles are initiated in response to Google when they were first outed in 2010, running their little vehicle up and down the highway. The strongest, perhaps, competitors in this niche are not automakers at all, but Google, Apple, although they're quite secretive, and Uber, who I understand is not legal here in France, but nevertheless very well endowed, building a very large and expensive automated vehicles research program in Pittsburgh. Where do they fit? Where do these non-traditional but clearly capable, self-investing, and ambitious, did I say that twice? Ambitious competitors, where do they fit in this particular arena and discussion?
There's the hot potato. Is that case reaching? It is case reaching.
Yeah, well, I think these companies will to a certain extent, not wait and keep executing their own strategies. As Marjolein indicated in her introductory, the heart of the car will be the software, not the engine. I think these companies that you just mentioned, Jane, have understood that very clearly and probably working on it. One way or the other, and we are discussing that also in Urtico, and I also know that the Dutch team working in the ministry on that, we have to see how we get connected, to use a word, to these companies and see if somehow these companies can be aligned with what is foreseen in the next future also across Europe. And to a certain extent, these companies have to, because why was the mobile phone or the smartphone or the Apple phone introduced by Apple successful? Because there were a lot of frameworks around mobile communication already in place. So yes, they put the world upside down, but on the other hand, there was a kind of, say, established embedment in which they could put that offering into the market. I think in this particular space, it's similar. So introducing an autonomous car without all the things, I think that the Dutch presidency now has identified as major themes that need to be cracked. None of these companies will be successful. So, but aligning them and make them part of the journey, I think, is extremely important.
Thank you.
My reaction would be as follows. First of all, it's a good question. The question you could ask is it relevant in the context of what the Dutch presidency tries to do? That's something else. Okay. Our ingoing position is all competition is driving innovation. Okay, even if it comes from outside the sector. So it can only, enhance more innovation also on this side of the pond. Second, the reality is, because it's positioned as if you have them and you have us. The reality is different because there are already all kinds of partnerships and alliances taking place between the companies you are mentioning and several OEMs based here in Europe. So that means the reality is not so black and white as we probably try to see it, or as it's painted through the media. At the end of the day, and I mentioned that I think before, all the big players in this whole area of coming up with new mobility solutions are global players. Their marketplace is a global marketplace. And in that respect, I would like to link it back to what we heard before from the Dutch government. I think another opportunity, another priority which the Dutch presidency could assume here is look at what is it in terms of regulations globally which affects connectivity and automation. We touched yesterday on the Vienna Convention, and we've heard there's some positive progress to be expected there. But there's a lot of work going on in Geneva in the context of UNEC through WP29. And so I know there are already good discussions going on there between US, Europe, and Japan. And I think we need to kind of step change, probably the progress to be made on some of these discussions. And again, I think the Dutch presidency could provide some stimulus there.
I have a feeling that I'm coming across as very, very optimistic today, so I don't know whether that's good or bad. But in the margins of the Congress, I have various bilateral meetings with countries or regions outside the EU. And I had a meeting this morning with, doesn't matter whom. And actually, the message I heard back was, look, we are following closely what's happening in Europe with regards to cooperative, connected vehicle, automated vehicle. We really like the European approach with what member states are doing, how you deal with funding, how you deal with tests on various transport networks. Your comprehensive approach to analyzing the required standardization, international dimension, legislation. Keep us informed, keep us in the loop. We want to follow you. We think your approach is right. And that's why I think what the Dutch presidency is proposing, what we have been discussing here, is we really, again, I repeat it, we have a momentum. If we do it right, with the right stakeholders, with the right European industry, but obviously not only European industry, but if we, as Europe, show the example, others will follow, because why to invent something else when you can just take and copy what they have done and developed? I know it's optimistic, but on the other hand, we have it. We have a very strong political commitment from the Dutch, but also from other member states in the room and outside. And I think the only stupid thing that we can do is that we waste this opportunity.
I think I'd just reiterate the comment about competition drives innovation. If it wasn't for the competition between Google and Apple, I don't think we'd have the smartphones and the functionality we have now. And it's interesting to see how that may play within the bounds we have in Europe in the automated vehicle space.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a short reaction on DG Move. Wouldn't it be a great idea to use the existing corridors? I think in principle, yes, that would be a great idea indeed. If there is something, don't find out something new. But there is a but to it. These corridors are all highways. And with the smart mobility or the cooperative and connected and automated cars, we also have to get experience on other bits and pieces of our road network. For example, in rural areas or in the urban areas. So whatever you learn on these existing corridors needs to be applicable also in the other areas. So I think at least we have to add something to existing corridors. Yeah. And what I would like to tell you, I more or less forgot during my speech, is that we have during our presidency another initiative. We have a truck platoon challenge. The project leader of this is in the room. So if you have any questions, you can see him. He's sitting over there. And we have some information here at the front. And the idea is that from several member countries, small truck platoons come to the Netherlands. And we have had a lot of cooperation also from ASEA with that. And also this is another example of learning by doing. And also we hope it'll give some experience during the Dutch presidency.
Yeah, Xavier, please.
Maybe a few words. I would like to stress what was said by the Finnish minister about learning by doing. And this whole ensemble of tests, experiments, demonstrations. In France, we tend to call our cooperative system not a test, not a demonstration. It's called a pilot project because we think it produces something, not only evaluation. Evaluation is one component, but it produces, well, knowledge, specification. It almost produces services. And it produces the way that road infrastructure managers and mainly OEMs discuss and produce simultaneously the necessary things. So I think this learning by doing that identifies what is necessary by doing the service, but trying to provide it on a small scale is really productive. And that if this reflection of what is needed on the EU level as a regulation would be based on concrete cases where needs emerge, I think it could be a way forward that would be useful for everyone.
I worked in the ministry for a wonderful man called Neville Rees, no longer with us, and he would say to all his staff, you can't learn to walk the tightrope from a textbook. You've got to get on it and fall off. That's how you learn. So, what I would like to do now is invite the 5 panel members, a couple of minutes each on summary, wise words, sound bites, your final thoughts. I'll then attempt a summary and then give the last 5 minutes to Marjolein to reflect on how useful today has been for the work they've got ahead. Xavier, would you like to start?
I will spare your time because my last thought was maybe the ones that I would like to put on the table. Let's do it by learning by doing.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd reiterate that. As I say, we're on the cusp of something really exciting with these technologies. We can only learn and take forward by by coordinated trials, large scale, seeing the interaction between these vehicles and non-equipped vehicles, the need for the infrastructure, and being able to elaborate the benefits and what's needed in terms of standardization and future regulation.
Yeah, a couple of points from my side. Yesterday I spoke about anticipation through leadership. I think there's clear leadership here coming from the Dutch team. So I sincerely hope that that leadership gets translated into tangible action. And the other two topics from Ertico, a pan-European perspective, are coherency. So make sure that what is defined in the context of this initiative is consistent with the work, for instance, in the platform cooperative ITS, so that there is really a leverage on existing know-how. And last but not least, ensure that there is that continuity. So coherency, continuity combined with leadership. That should, and then I'm very, as you, Magda, I'm very optimistic.
Good. That makes two of us. At least, I hope more in this room. I did tell you that we are planning to come up with this master plan for interoperable deployment of cooperative ITS. And I'm just hoping that when we have it, Peter Handy's words quoted at the beginning, we have a very good plan, but there is something wrong with it, will not be true, which is also why I would like to invite you, once we have the report from the CITS platform ready, it will be out, it will be public, and will be published. And I very much hope that you will find time to read it and let us know what you think of this report, so that we make sure that the master plan is actually a good one.
Yeah.
But from our side, first of all, as industry, as automotive industry, we are grateful to all the support we are getting from both the Commission as well as the Member States to embark on initiatives to make this new technology work. And that's really very much appreciated. With regard to the proposals which we were exposed to from the Dutch government, I think it would be good that, building upon all the brilliant ideas we heard, that we can narrow it down to kind of a 5-point program. And the 5 points which I mentioned throughout my interventions would, in my opinion, be, first of all, make sure we take advantage of the Dutch presidency to make further progress at the international level through WP29 on some of the UNEC regulations affecting connectivity and automation. That would help everybody moving forward, not only in Europe, but also globally. Second is to take stock of all what we learned today. That we have been exposed to a variety of pilot projects. Member states have done an outstanding job in pioneering. There's a lot of good stuff going on in which different parts of industry were involved, also stakeholders from outside industry. Let's capture these learnings and let's turn them into insights which could form the foundation of a distinctive European program forward. The third one is, and that's especially taking into account the fact that this will be a Dutch presidency and member state-led initiative. I mean, let's look at road infrastructure and what needs to be done in a harmonized, perhaps that's a too big word, in a coordinated way to drive consistency in how we are going to move forward in our road infrastructure investments for the future to enable both connected and automated driving. The corridors, very important. When I talked with the CEOs of our member companies on what is missing in Europe, they immediately would say the opportunity to do large-scale tests. A lot of OEMs go to the US to do large-scale testing because there you have, the enormous markets. Here, before you do something, you're already in another country. And so this multi-country opportunities in terms of scaling some of these demonstration projects, like will be established on truck platooning under the Dutch presidency, is very welcomed and could provide some new opportunities for the future. So those are the 5 points.
Excellent. Now, this is not a well-organized summary, it's more a catalogue of what you've all been saying. Perhaps one of the key points is that nobody has opposed this. Nobody has said it's not a good idea, best not to do it. I've detected an immense amount of support. There's been comments that parts of your plan are difficult, but hey, so what? And everybody has thanked you for doing something, and take my analogy, getting the snowball rolling down the hill so that the avalanche can start. We talked about defining terminology, looking at what is the fundamental need for cross-border interoperability, and fundamental might mean global, not just European. Harmonised legal and regulatory frameworks. Parts of it could be easy, like testing and certification and type approval. Other parts, like liability and usability, could be tricky. We looked at data ownership, the availability and the usage of data. We looked at user acceptance, listening to what users want, as opposed to what the technologists would like to sell, user privacy, societal aspects, and societal impacts. The platform cooperative ITS came up many times, and people are clearly expecting good things from it and waiting for it to publish. There was the point about continuity, and I think I'm not giving away any secrets when I say the Netherlands government's been talking to the UK government to bridge the gap across the presidencies. So there's a plan there for some continuity. Many people said, take stock, analyse, think about where we are, check that we know where we are, and that we think we know where we want to go next. Cross-border testing is needed and could be facilitated by existing thinking on corridors. And when thinking of corridors, don't just look at high-quality roads. There's low-quality roads and possible other things like rail to think about. The Commission platform is going to generate a roadmap, and that will feed into the Netherlands presidency, and that was clearly welcome. The cost-benefit of digital transport, or ITS in particular, is not well understood and needs some more work. It may be that Working Group 1 solves some of this, or it may be that more is needed. Think of the link to electromobility and think about joining the two. And then I think, to pick up Eric's comment, just get on with it. Don't forget to connect with Working Party 29 at UNECE. We're on a parallel course. We need to make sure that we actually converge. So, with that, let me give you the last 5 minutes to reflect.
Well, I don't think I will need 5 minutes, but I'll give it a try. Well, of course, it's very nice to sit here, and also the other members of my team, and just hearing everybody say applause, applause. It's a very good idea, very good initiative. That's nice. That's very good, and it makes us even more optimistic in the way we are working. And I'm an optimistic person by myself. So. But I'm also thinking there are a lot of expectations. This is a good idea. It's up into the declaration. It's in the Dutch initiative. It's in the Dutch presidency. And, well, we have strong shoulders, so we can take a lot on it. But I just want to come back to the major point also in my speech, is that this is not something we can do as a Dutch presidency. We can do a little thing, and this little thing is maybe not that little, but we can give the development a big boost. But after, we have to work together. We have really, all of you here have to work with us, with the Commission, with the industry, to get this development further in Europe. So yes, we will do our part, but we very much expect you also to do your part, and we are very happy that already the UK government stated they wanted to take over the initiative from us. There are 2 presidencies in between, but anyhow, that's very good. Well, we are going forward, and maybe I'll finish with asking you one question. Maybe I was a bit too quick in between, Eric, but what's very much in top of my mind, and I've also been discussing this with Magda, is that now we all agree this is important and is a huge challenge and a huge chance. We have to get it any further, and we have to start thinking on how are we going to proceed, what governance are we going to have. So I really would like to ask you, give it a thought, give it a thorough thought. How are we going to organize that we really are going to answer the questions, and we really will have this self-driving cars doing all the good things to society and to economy we see for us. So please help us also in the next stage of our declaration, which will be mainly on to make it more concrete. What can we do? How can we do the governance? Thank you very much. Thank you very much for being here.
It's my pleasure to thank the panel. I'd like to thank Frans op de Beek and his staff, and Davide from Ertico, who actually made this happen and glued the thing together. And I can see there's some brochures on the front of the podium, which I expect of people to take away. Thank you very much for coming. Please thank the panel again. They've been great.